I was always sort of a seeker. My parents were not religious. During my lifetime, they were not. I think they were when they were young. They met at a church function. Somehow got away from the church. I think it had a lot to do with the depression and lack of money and feeling out of place or out of dress or something. Anyway, they never took me to church. I was in the Air Force for 30 years. Don't think I attended any kind of a church except a military chapel during that whole 30 years. After I retired, my first job was as the executive director of the Montgomery Habitat for Humanity affiliate. And I did that for about a year and a half. I finally decided that I had to resign for several reasons. One of which was I was representing a Christian organization and I really wasn't one, at least officially. We came to church here on the first day of January of '93 and have been here basically every Sunday we're in town since. In the spring of, I believe it was '94, Tom Krieger began planning the first mission trip that Mulder had ever been on to Costa Rica. And I decided to go along. Again, feeling a little uncomfortable because really wasn't officially a Christian at the time. And we made it to the Birmingham airport, barely in time to catch our flight. We stopped in New Orleans and then started out across the Gulf of Mexico. About halfway across the Gulf, the pilot came on and said, "We have a serious emergency. We're going to prepare to ditch. I want you to take off your shoes and rings, whatever jewelry, and put your head down and get ready." I had been involved with aviation for a long time. I've been through several scrapes, but that one reached me. I was very much afraid I was going to die without being saved. But God took care of that because he put the pastor, Ronnie Bearden, on my left hand. Ronnie was sitting there. And so Ronnie talked me through it, and I accepted Christ. About that time, the pilot came back on and said, "Well, it doesn't seem to be as serious as we first thought. We're going to divert to Meridian in the Yucatan." I found out later that during this time, old Tom, who has flown everything and been through every emergency there was, when the pilot announced this, he called the stewardess over and said, "Hey, bring me my lunch." So, and we got there late in the afternoon. And we were going to be working at this church, which was in a small town, basically, several miles off the west end of the San Jose airport. The next day, we did our work, and then we were going to have the first church service that night. And the pastor had several young people living with him, one of which was a young lady. She was probably 13 or 14. That night at the church service, she started doing very strange things. If you've ever seen the movie The Exorcist, over the course of 3 nights, that young lady had all, if you want to call it symptoms, if you will, of demon possessions that the girl did in The Exorcist, except she never turned her head around 80 degrees. But all the other things. The demons that were there, I don't know how many there were, probably about 3. They all spoke colloquial English. This girl spoke not a word of English. They knew all the pastors by name. And they knew things about the pastors. Very disconcerting, but strangely, I sort of stayed back on the periphery because I really didn't know what to do. But I wasn't afraid. 2 days before, I don't know what I would have done. I might have been running out to save my life, but I knew that I was saved and I wasn't afraid. This went on for about 3 nights, and it got so bad on the 3rd night that the young lady basically went into demonic convulsions, I guess you'd say, on the floor. And it took 6 big men, and I mean probably 230-plus guys, to hold her down. She would go into these strange and very powerful physical things, and you would think she'd be exhausted, but it would go away and she'd wake up and she didn't know anything happened. I'm a literally trained guy, semi-scientist. Before that happened, you would have had a hard time convincing me that there are demonic powers in this world. You don't anymore. I've seen and heard, well, I didn't see, that's the one thing. They never materialized, but you certainly heard them. You knew they were there. And as a result of that trip, I got to be the first person baptized in that new church. And they baptized me with a 5-gallon bucket brim full of water So I guess I got baptized, sort of a combination sprinkling and immersion, but they didn't waste a drop of that 5 gallons.